Previously on the all-new adventures of the Doctor Who Book Club podcast.
And Chris, that brings us to what we're going to be doing for the month of May.
Yes. So I was wanting to bring us to a new author. Because it's been a while since we've had a new author. And so I was wanting to go off-world. Because I toyed up a few things. I wanted to do something truly science fiction-y, fantastical. And I also as well wanted to remember one of my favourite TARDIS crews of the modern era. So we are going to be joining the 11th Doctor and the Ponds as they experience Hunter's Moon by Paul Finch.
I know absolutely nothing about it.
No.
Or what it even looks like.
I do know that the audiobook is read by Arthur Darvill.
Oh.
So that would suggest that Rory has a bit to play in the book. So, I know he's in it. But, so there we go.
Lovely.
Hunter's Moon.
And now our story continues.
Welcome, everyone, to the all-new adventures of the Doctor Who Book Club podcast. This is Matt in Minnesota.
Chris in South London. How's it going, Matt?
Quite well, Chris. Rainy, late April day as we're recording this, and we've experienced new episodes of Doctor Who. How are things going with you?
Yeah. We are now getting slightly warmer weather, and we have Doctor Who, which is great. At the time of recording, we don't have any news as to when season 3 is going to be happening, if at all. So I'm determined to enjoy this.
And as of recording, 3 episodes have aired, so maybe we can share our thoughts on the Robot Revolution. Yeah,
I thought it was a solid start. I very much enjoyed Belinda's chemistry with the Doctor. And this pairing, or this TARDIS crew, is possibly my favourite since the Capaldi era. And she reminds me very much of Donna.
I very much get like a Tegan or Ian and Barbara vibe from her as well, just because she's a reluctant companion. And
yes.
Although in the more recent episodes, she's been less anxious to get home, I would say.
She's still concerned about home.
Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, I've much enjoyed Robot Revolution. I thought there was some sort of like serendipitous or unintentional tie-in with Joy to the World, as that ends with, Joy becoming a star.
Yeah.
And you have the star field, and Robot Revolution pans down from that same star field. So it's almost like if you watch these, back to back, it's some good continuity there.
Yeah. It also as well reminds me, there is I think it's a new adventure book that features a star system that is named after a Coronation Street character.
Huh.
And apparently in Coronation Street at that time, somebody named a star after one of the other characters. And so it kind of slightly reminded me of that. But yeah, I thought it was quite fun. I have seen some people say the villain was quite bland, but I think that was the point.
I thought it was funny that the villain was, or the boyfriend, was named Alan. It made me think of All Ears Alan from Fugitive of the Jadoon, and maybe there's something with that name.
Yes, yeah.
But I was very shocked by the cat getting vaporized, I have to say. Although it would make for a great badge ribbon idea. You could have a cat emoji and then missing Contact Lucy at number 7.
Yes.
But I'm glad at least they didn't show the cat until after it had mostly vaporized.
Yes.
Much less personal that way.
Yeah.
And then I also wondered if Belinda perhaps worked at the same hospital Martha did, Royal Hope, but I did pause it a few different places, and the signage said Able Free Hospital on a lot of the signs, so it doesn't appear to be the same hospital. And I was surprised when the doctor cut all the electricity too.
Yes. Yeah, me too.
I wonder how many people died then.
Okay, sure, hospitals do have backup systems, but still, like, assuming it's an NHS hospital, I'm not going to guarantee that, like, everything's going to kick into life, which isn't knocking the NHS, it's just a reflection of the funding.
I also wondered if Mrs. Flood lives in between Ruby and Belinda, or perhaps she just lives next to all of the doctor's companions.
Yeah, possibly.
Simultaneously or
Yes.
something.
Yes.
I also saw a joke post online saying that Mrs. Flood could potentially be a new Time Lord known as the Neighbor. She's everyone's neighbor across time and space.
Yeah, that would work. Yeah.
The ending with the Statue of Liberty floating in space, that begs the question, is that a weeping angel corpse? Or perhaps, another more likely possibility, given the proximity of the Statue of Liberty and the Eiffel Tower, maybe they were looking at the ruins of Las Vegas.
Ooh, yes.
I mean, I'm sure there's at least one London-looking cab in Vegas, too.
Yes. But also, like surely there should have been more debris that the Doctor would have noticed. Like the Shard, for example. And because, like, these things are comparatively small, even if they're very recognisable.
What did you think of Lux, the second episode?
Lux, I loved Lux. I think Lux was one of my favourite episodes for quite some time. Beautifully animated, brilliantly played by Alan Cumming. It was very well done. I hadn't quite figured out that it was going to be one of the gods. I really loved it, and it was quite poignant in places. I'd be interested to hear what you make of the accents.
They seemed fine.
Yeah.
You do tend to get a little bit of an affect change once an American actor or Canadian actor has been living in the UK for a while. So even their like a flat American accent or a Southern accent isn't quite 100%, but it was fine. And I did really appreciate that they at least commented on how segregated things were back then too.
Yes.
And it's nice that, it's not only the Rosa Parks episode that talks about segregation in the South and United States. And and that ending with Mr. Ring-a-Ding, the whole Cosmos 2001 A Space Odyssey type deal, that was an interesting way to end it.
Yes. I also appreciated that the waiter at the diner, it was implied that he was, shall we say, unusually progressive for the time. Also, as well, I would say he was definitely kind of coded.
Oh, yeah. He was pinging my gaydar, like, a little bit, I think.
Yes, somewhat. Mark Morris, who I think was very excited at the fact that one of his books, Wide Blue Yonder, appeared in Lux.
Ah, on the shelf in the...
Yes, on the shelf. So he is part of the Doctor Who canon.
I wonder if we've seen the last of those three fans or not, given that they survived, and the final episode of the season is called The Reality War.
Yeah, I slightly hope we have seen the last of them, but I do wonder. But yeah.
How about episode 3, The Well?
Yeah, I was not expecting The Well to be a sequel. Because I've been trying to go into these things unspoiled, so I had heard no rumour, and I gasped. Yeah, it was a really good horror episode. And I also quite like the meta nature of the title, The Well, because people are obviously criticised for going back to the well and bringing back all characters. And here we literally go to the well. Yeah, I think so far this is like the strongest opening trilogy of episodes that I can remember. I think we have to go back to Capaldi and Bill.
Yeah, I really enjoyed The Well also, despite its horror tropes. Some of the shots were just really beautiful, though, like the gas giant and the shots in the quarry of like the Marines kind of fanning out in how quiet and still it was. The actor who was playing, is it Alice?
Yes, Rose Ellis, yeah.
I only follow Corey and not EastEnders, so didn't catch her from that.
I think she won Strictly Come Dancing, which is the Dancing with the Stars equivalent, and so she is a much loved personality over here. And like I thought she just gave an amazing performance, and I liked the fact that like at no stage were we made to feel any degree of pity for the fact that she was disabled.
Yeah.
It was just a thing and people just worked with it. Yeah, I thought it was very well done.
The tie-in was spoiled for me,
Ah.
so that it was unfortunate, but didn't even think it needed the tie-in.
No.
That was just kind of icing on the cake. It worked just as well as a standalone.
Yes.
Or if you hadn't seen the
Yeah.
previous episode, and the monster or the creature, I mean, was so different in this one too.
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me, for Lux, I was sitting there confidently expecting the Daleks to rock up, just because I thought that the projector, the end of the projector, looked like it could be the end of a kind of like a Dalek eyepiece. I was just there confidently expecting, and I was like, oh, the Daleks aren't in this. Right, okay.
It's interesting that a spoon plays into kind of all four of the gods' appearances. I think there was a spoon in the giggle at one point,
Yeah.
and then Maestro's reflection in a spoon, and then
Yeah.
in Empire of Death, the spoon was in a deleted scene. The Doctor gives himself, is it the spoon or the whistle? Is it like a spoon comes into play there too? And I don't know if that's just like, if it was supposed to be like a silver and it was more the metal that was reflecting the moonlight, or if that played into it, or if it was just a coincidence.
Is this going to culminate in a homage to Sylvester McCoy playing the spoons on Kato Mara?
It's a special guest star. maybe.
Yes.
Well, we still have more than half the season in front of us. So
Yes, indeed.
with the uncertainty of Doctor Who's future, at least in the near term,
Yeah.
I am very much cherishing, or almost relishing each episode as it comes out.
Yes. And also, without wishing to tempt fate, I would say quality-wise, this is far more season 26 than it is season 22.
Mm.
In fact, I would say it's stronger than that from just a general consistency point of view. Yeah, I'm very much enjoying, so hopefully we'll hear positive news soon. But regardless, we are very lucky to have such a solid run of episodes.
And the other thing that's kind of interesting is that, these were all filmed as part of a 26 episode order.
Yeah.
When you add in War Between the Land and the Sea and the 60th specials and stuff. And so it's like they didn't have a chance to course correct.
No.
So it makes this season all the more surprising, I guess, in terms of how much I'm enjoying it, given that they filmed it, back to back with the previous season.
Well, maybe they just course corrected themselves. And just realised the stories that worked better.
And Belinda as a companion, I mean, yeah, the chemistry she has with Shooty and stuff. I mean, it's partially because her and Shooty are closer to the same age than him and Millie were.
Yeah.
Yeah, just their rapport feels a little better.
I am slightly, not necessarily fearful, but I am just wondering to what extent I'm going to enjoy the Ruby-centric episode we have in
Next
store.
week, yeah.
Yeah, next week. I can't say I've been missing Ruby. Yeah, and Lauren is absolutely loving Belle.
Well, we have some book news to share. Couple of new 15th Doctor adventures have been announced for audio. So last year we got On Ghost Beach and I think one with a Sasquatch. And then on October 2nd, so available both digitally and on CD, we'll get another pair. This will be Counter-Strike by Una McCormick.
Okay.
And Firefall by a friend of the show, Beth Axford.
Cool.
Very exciting. And then also just been announced that Doctor Who Magazine issue number 617, which is due out on May 22nd, will include a reprint of the rare Target book, The Wheel in Space by Terrence Dix.
Oh, okay.
And so this is one that I think a lot of the stock, when it originally was published in 1988, may have been lost in a fire or a warehouse thing. Maybe I'm conflating that with a Daypal thing, but it had a very limited print run.
Yeah.
And while it was republished in Volume 1 of the Essential Terrence Dix collection back in 2021, this is the first time it's being republished as a standalone volume.
Cool.
And it will feature a new cover by Dan Lyles, who has done the other recent Target covers for Shooty's run, and will feature a foil embossed logo on the cover as well.
Cool.
So, yeah, for the price of the magazine, you get a free, previously very rare Target book.
Yes. Now a good deal more common. Yeah, cool. Okay, so I think that gets us to show and tell. So what have you got for us this month?
Sticking with the DWM theme, I was catching up on some recent back issues, and I'm going to talk about a one-off comic strip from issue 614 called Dance Till You Drop, which struck my fancy. It features the 15th Doctor visiting Studio 54 in New York City in 1977. And if that wasn't exciting enough, it also features the Doctor encountering two characters created by school kids, a la a Love and Monsters style contest.
Okay.
So you have BT, like BEAT,
Yeah.
who looks a lot like HR Puffin-Stuff, but with one giant eyeball, a la Alpha Centauri.
Yeah.
They hail from the beating dimension of dance.
Okay.
And it also features a talking, hypnotic alley cat. So, the story is by Jason Quinn, John Freeman, and Mike Collins, with art by Mike Collins. And the Doctor engages in a dance-off on the Studio 54 dance floor while turning to the reader and saying, "Let's all just pretend this makes sense." And there's a memorable moment when the Doctor lifts up Beatty the monster, like lift as in the lift from Dirty Dancing.
Yes, okay.
And Beatty belts out, "I'm having the time of my life." And there's also some relevant nods to Sophie Ellis-Bextor's Murder on the Dance Floor.
Okay.
I'd say it was quite a surreal outing, but then again, we've had The Devil's Court in Lux.
Yes, I was just thinking that these feel like Mr. Ring-a-Ding-Ding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the competition was organized by the Lakes International Comic Art Festival in partnership with DWM, and it featured submissions from children ages 8 to 12 who were challenged to design a Doctor Who monster of their very own. And the challenge also celebrates 60 years of Doctor Who comic strips, with the first one being published back in TV Comic in 1964, and was inspired by a similar competition in 1972 in TV's Action.
Oh, okay.
Back then, the winner was one Ian Farrington, who dreamt up the Ugrax, who appeared in a one-off strip written by Dennis Hopper with the Third Doctor and drawn by Jerry Haylock.
Right.
So,
Presumably not that Dennis Hopper.
no. But yeah, so that was it's a fun little one-off strip featuring some very bizarre and fun character art and a fun setting.
Ooh.
So listeners, if you haven't gotten to that one yet or may have passed it by, it's worth another look.
Okay, yeah. I do have that. I've been a digital subscriber of DWM for a while, but I haven't been reading the comics so much since the 15th era started. But yeah, I'll go and check that one out.
And I should mention the Hypnotizing Cat was created by Ethan Faulkner, and Beatty was created by Emily Page. How about for you, Chris?
So I'm going to start off with an honourable mention. There is a brilliant Titanic podcast series that is narrated by Paul McGann, based on research by his brother Stephen, and it tells the story of Titanic, which you might say, well, that's been quite well told, but they have a very personal angle because their great uncle, I think James McGann was his name, was on the Titanic.
Oh, wow.
He survived the Titanic, and so he is a kind of like a key witness of various events. It's absolutely gripping listening. But as I say, that is an honourable mention. So I found myself last month in Waterstones. I was going to be going off to a meetup organised by the British Fantasy Society, and kind of like I was there kind of grabbing a beverage of choice, and then I discovered right in front of me was Ben Aronovich.
Oh, wow.
And I was a little bit surprised to kind of like see him gather at basically just like a little fan meeting. And it then transpired that he was at the wrong Waterstones.
Oh, gee.
And he was supposed to be at the one Tottenham Court Road. He was actually at the one Piccadilly Circus. And he then kind of like, headed out. So I didn't have a chance to have a conversation with him about kind of faulty computers or other things from the 90s.
He excused himself.
Yes,
Too funny.
yeah, because he was there to be attending a kind of a book signing. I don't think he was going to be signing any books, but it was a book signing / book reading, and he then quickly realised that this was not quite his crowd. So yes, so quite entertaining. And I then spent part of the evening talking to someone who was a friend of Una McCormack. but was not given any heads up on Una's book news. So a sighting of Ben Aronovich, and I was being asked by various people, what's your interest in science fiction and fantasy? And I was like, do I talk about the fact that I do a Doctor Who podcast when Ben Aronovich is on an adjacent chair? Because also, do I give him a card? Do I what do I do? So I decided just to be cautious, because I was thinking, I can't believe he's here, and if he is genuinely here, then he's probably not wanting to be reminded of Doctor Who stuff. Yeah,
well,
so
he has a successful
very
franchise.
successful.
Yeah,
Very successful.
Rivers of London is the...
Yes, I think Andrew Cartmel has said that he's really glad that Rivers of London has been such a big success. But yes, unexpected Ben Aronovich sighting.
Very cool, if fleeting.
Yes, yeah.
And we'd be remiss if we didn't also mention, rest in peace, Jean Marsh. She made it to 90 years old, and of course she played Companion. I would call her a companion, Sarah Kingdom.
Yeah, she's a companion.
As well as Joan of England in the Crusades.
Yes.
And Morgaine in Battlefield.
Yes. Yeah. A fantastic, well-regarded actor and writer outside of Doctor Who as well. She co-created, I believe, certainly co-wrote Upstairs, Downstairs, which paved the way for things like Downton Abbey. It was just as focused on life below stairs, hence the name. Fantastic creative force. When we're very lucky, I would say, that she was very keen to kind of spent a good deal of time and showed a great deal of love, I would say, for Doctor Who fandom. She didn't owe us anything. There's no reason why. She didn't have to do things like Big Finish and stuff, but she did. So yeah. And
also love briefly for one of the Doctors, being married to John Pertwee for some time.
I didn't know that. Okay, I had forgotten that. Okay, if I ever knew.
Just 5 years from 1955 until 1960.
Okay.
I'm not sure if she's I don't think she's the mother of Sean.
Don't think the ages would...
No. Sean Pertwee's mother is Ingeborg Rosa.
Yes. Yes, I thought that...
Anyway. Yes, rest in peace, Jean Marsh. So this month we are reviewing Hunter's Moon by Paul Finch. This was originally published in April of 2011 and features the 11th Doctor, Rory and Amy. Yeah. And I think it's set during Series 5. I don't believe they're married yet.
Ooh, I don't know. Yeah, maybe you're right. But I thought I had seen some speculation that it might be later than that. But it's under 2011 novels, as you say. But yeah.
Yeah, it would have been published in the same year as Series 6. So
yeah.
Maybe, yeah. But I thought there was a reference to Rory being the boyfriend at one point, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. I mean, certainly there's no tie into Series 6's arc, or if it is, it's incredibly subtle. I didn't notice it.
And the cover features what appears to be a cyborg or partially converted Cyberman.
Yes, or General Zod.
Or, yes, standing in front of a futuristic city with a full moon in the background.
Yes.
And the tagline says, "A game that can only end in death."
Yes.
Which immediately brought to mind things like the Hunger Games, Squid Game, and the games on DC Comics War World.
Yes.
And what do we want to say about Paul Finch?
Paul Finch. So Paul Finch has an interesting background. He is a descendant of Charles Dickens. Which it doesn't say that on his Wikipedia, but it does say on his dad's Wikipedia, so I have assumed. So his dad was a writer on Coronation Street, whereas Paul was a police officer for several years for Greater Manchester Police, and then became a journalist. I think some of that background shows itself in the book, I will say.
He also wrote a bit for the Bill, I think.
Yes.
Or got to start writing for the Bill.
Yeah, he did write for the Bill. He's written quite a bit for Big Finish. He's done Leviathan. So that's one of the Doctor Who Lost stories. It was based on a pitch that his dad had written. Also Exagora and Sentinels of New Dawn. And he has written a story in the Tales of Trenzalore as well. He's also written quite a few series of non-Doctor Who books, and he's been nominated for various different British Fantasy Awards. Has quite a long career, and I think with kind of like horror leanings.
Yeah, he's also written for the shared universe of Abaddon Books.
Yes.
And to date, this is his only Doctor Who novel, and it features a prologue and 40 untitled chapters.
Mm-hmm.
So a high chapter count in this one. Shall we jump in?
Yeah, let's get started.
So we start in London, where we meet a former cop called Harry Mossop. He's left the Metropolitan Police under a bit of a cloud, and he's struggling to make ends meet. He's been working as a security officer for a man called Grant Pangborn, but he was fired from that job. And he decides he's going to break into the office and make it look like a security break-in, where he's like, oh, you should have kept me on as your security officer in a bid to get rehired. And he's captured by two mysterious figures because Pangborn is actually an alien called Zorax. And there are a lot of alien names beginning with X and Z in this, so it was a little challenging to keep them all straight. But
yes, good luck, listeners.
And to try and take control of the situation and make sure Harry doesn't, spread word about his true nature and the fact that he's kind of doing like a human trafficking operation. With immigrants from like Eastern Europe and stuff, and Zorax decides to kidnap Harry's wife, Dora, as well as their daughter, Sophie, to use as leverage. Yeah.
So, the Doctor, Amy and Rory, meanwhile, arrive at LP9, which is a commercial spaceport on the fringes of a failing empire. And almost immediately, they receive an anonymous message that warns the Doctor to leave, which is a bit of a surprise, because LP9's police force is run by Zalu, who is an old friend of the Doctor, specifically from a period where the Doctor had white hair.
So probably first or third, maybe.
Yeah, it feels more Pertwee.
It does, yeah.
Yes. Investigating further, they learn that LP9, this spaceport, is in the grip of criminal syndicates, and that its Torridon administrators are largely puppets.
And that's a kind of an oblique reference, because was it in the Visitation that the Torridons were mentioned as being at war with the Pteroleptals?
Yes, and the Pteroleptals get a mention here as well.
And potentially a cameo in the casino.
Yes, and Roy and Amy go off to the casino, and I think that's where this month's reading is.
It is, yeah, read for us by Arthur Darvill. So this is after they've explored the casino a little bit and they're getting ready to leave.
Yes.
Let's have a listen.
Oh, once you've seen one casino, you've seen them all, Amy said. Are we going? Rory nodded, but as they headed towards the nearest exit, he noticed an oval marble table with a raised rim. A black cloth was laid over its surface, written with odd lettering and marked with a series of connected gold boxes. Another bunch of excited Torridon was standing around it, throwing what looked like dice. At one end of the table, a non-Torridon, a bipedal reptilian with fawn-coloured skin covered in large brown blotches, but dressed in a bright blue uniform with gold braid, was acting as dealer. Looks like craps, Rory said. And, Amy replied. She'd been the keenest among them to come down here, but was already bored. She was half wondering if there might be a show they could catch. She mentioned this, but Rory ambled over to the table. Told you, he said. I mean, superficially, it's different, but it's the same type of game. There's the pass line. There's the don't pass bar. The dice were not dissimilar to Earth dice in that they were small cubes, though they bore glyph-like figures rather than patterns of dots. The dealer watched calmly, his green tongue occasionally flickering. One particular player, a sleek, handsome Torridon, wearing a billowing silk gown similar to a kimono and his long white hair tied in a topknot almost like a samurai, rolled again and again. Other players placed their betting chips on different sections of the table. Some were winning, others losing, but the shooter, as Rory thought of him, was clearing up every time. Several other Taurodom were with him, big, brutal characters in mismatched garb that looked more like space armour than work clothing. One by one, the other players drifted away, but the successful shooter was hardly concerned. He'd now amassed a mountain of chips. "That bloke's almost too good to be true," Rory said quietly, though it wasn't quietly enough. The shooter glanced across the table, suddenly noticing there were humans present. "You implying something?" he asked, though he sounded relaxed rather than angry. You keep on winning," Rory pointed out. "Really? I must have missed that." There were chuckles from around the table. "Oh, what I mean is, this is a game of chance," Rory said. "We have something like it on Earth. It takes a bit of skill, but it's mainly about luck, which makes it strange that you keep winning." Amy tugged at his arm. "Why don't we just go?" "You accusing me of cheating?" the shooter said. He still didn't sound angry, but he now leaned forward and Amy saw hard lines of muscle beneath his gown. "It doesn't matter," Rory said, backing away, but when he and Amy turned to leave, others of the shooter's compatriots had circled behind them. "How exactly could I cheat?" the shooter asked. "I didn't say you cheated," Rory replied. "It's clear what you meant. So I ask again, how could I cheat?" Rory shrugged. "On Earth, they sometimes use weighted dice." The shooter rolled the dice across the table. "Do these feel weighted to you?" Rory didn't bother to pick them up. I wouldn't know. I'm not an expert." "But you talk as if you are." The shooter now gazed at Rory with eerie intensity. "Look, pack it in with the tough guy gambler act, eh?" Amy snapped. "Can't you see we're not interested?" The shooter smiled again. "This one lets his woman fight his battles for him." There was ribald laughter. Rory felt his cheeks flush. "Come on." Amy grabbed Rory's arm and led him from the table, shouldering her way through the heavies half blocking their path. "You had better walk away, friend," the shooter said after them. "You're way past any help we can give you." Again there was laughter. Rory's brow burned, and before he knew it, he'd spun back around. He wasn't the inexperienced wimp he'd once been, he reminded himself. He'd seen things that even space rodents like these couldn't dream of. The shooter feigned surprise. "Whoa, so you've got some fight in you after all? Enough to take me on?"
Thank you very much, Arthur, for reading and performing that.
Yes.
Is quite the Scottish accent with Amy there. And as we've heard, Rory couldn't resist the call of the craps table and has wagered the TARDIS.
Yes. Let that be a lesson to you all. So Rory ends up captured and Amy stows away in a ship following him. And the Doctor realises that his friends have fallen foul of a gang working for the feared gangster Krausen Zorg. or Zorg, or... Yeah, how do you pronounce X-O-R-G?
I would say Zorg.
Zorg,
I think that's how
Yeah.
Arthur pronounced it.
Yeah, Amy and Rory have been separated. Rory and several others are crammed into a prison ship, and they've been dropped onto the surface of the moon, Gorgoror. While Amy, she's been discovered when she was stowed away. She's been extorted into working as a servant aboard Krausen's flagship, with an eye on her being used again as leverage. So there's a lot of leveraging happening.
And a lot of, I would say, misogyny.
Yes.
The society definitely does not treat women at the same level as men or other non-binary life forms.
Yes.
But,
but it's also, I would say that, and we'll probably go into this, the misogyny that we see and the prejudice is within the narrative, from the character's point of view, rather than within the actual narration. Does that make sense?
It does. I would maybe say that, I agree. I also think the narrative could have potentially done a stronger job pushing back against it
Yeah.
through like Amy or others.
That's true. And there is certainly one or two choice lines that I might touch on later.
So all three of our TARDIS team are now split up, and so on the moon, which is used as a hunting ground, Rory and the other prisoners, including Harry, Dora, and Sophie of the Mossop family, must survive the harsh terrain, the hostile wildlife, and the knowledge that they're about to be hunted for sport. Rory emerges as a reluctant leader in the group, working to kind of shepherd them through various ruined industrial zones and decaying facilities. Picture like a 1980s or 1990s film shot at night, and I think you get, in like an industrial setting, and you get the flavor there.
Yeah, there's a bit of a sense of like the escape from New York and Los Angeles movies here.
Or The Running Man, yeah.
Yeah.
And so Harry, the former police officer, ever optimistic, initially struggles to grasp the reality of their situation, while the tensions within the group rise, especially around Sophie's growing attachment to one of the other prisoners named Andre.
Yeah. Back aboard LP9, the Doctor arms himself with a specially modified transmat rifle and infiltrates the criminal world under the pretense of joining the hunt.
Yeah, and this gun was, like, initially the Doctor very, reluctant to carry any sort of weapon.
Yeah.
But this is apparently good for 3 charges, so he can fire 3 times and the transmat will work even across the entire solar system, and will transmat whatever he aims and shoots it at into a jail cell.
Yes. Yeah, and he has a big debate about the morality of this with his police officer friend Zalo. Yeah, so there's a gathering of hunters and gang leaders, and the Doctor demonstrates the rifle's power by killing an enemy, in fact merely transmatting him, and thereby impressing Krausen. The Doctor's got less money than he'd originally promised, but he claims that the rest is locked in his TARDIS, and that the TARDIS is rigged to destroy any intruder who tampers with it. And somewhat appeased by this, Krausen allows the Doctor to join the hunters, with the deadly chase set to begin in 24 hours.
And so on this moon called Gorgorer...
It's so hard to say.
Yeah. Rory and the prisoners go through a number of different kind of trials where they're fending off attacks from various monstrous creatures. I think in the prologue we got a glimpse of like an octopus eating someone, and then there's a wolf-like beast, and then at one point they come across a giant insect, and they utilize their surroundings, so like makeshift weapons, quick thinking, and a lot of courage, keeping them alive. But they also realize they're kind of being herded into more dangerous areas.
Yeah. I would also say one of the creatures is Agador, isn't it?
Yeah, referred to as a moon beast from Peladon.
Yeah. And I think the Doctor explicitly talks about Agador, so which again makes me think this is John Pertwee era. Yeah.
Like Time Lash, a sequel.
Yes!
To an unseen Pertwee story.
Yeah.
So Harry, the police officer, ex-cop, despite his blunders, does prove to be brave in battle, and Rory adopts a symbol, which is like a jagged mouth drawn in charcoal, which becomes a rallying point to help lead lost prisoners back together. And Dora, Harry's wife, collapses from exhaustion at one point, and it's only through Rory's leadership and Harry's stubbornness that they're able to survive, like, one encounter after another on the planet. Or moon, I should say.
Yeah. Meanwhile, back on Krausen's ship, Amy plots her escape, and she cons a dim-witted gangster into letting her access his quarters by challenging him to a drinking game and stealing his access cards once he passes out. This is quite adult, I would say.
Yeah, this whole sequence where she's like spiking his drink with different things and kind of leading him on.
Yeah, because like there are definite. It's not just undertones; there are tones. I would say, but I mean, she. Amy, I do really feel for Amy. She is having to operate in quite a harsh world.
What was coming to mind for me was like Princess Leia in Return of the Jedi type situations almost.
Yeah.
Minus the chains. I mean, she was conscripted to like carry drinks and stuff, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of seedy stuff going on.
Yeah. Searching for the TARDIS and the ship's hold, she discovers a man calling himself Zorax. And so, listener, you may remember in amongst all of these like weird names, primarily beginning with X or Z, Zorax is the guy that was on Earth that Harry and his family fell foul of.
Mm.
And Zorax was once a respected Toradon leader, and he's now been imprisoned by Krausen for knowing too much. Amy frees him, but a priority remains finding the TARDIS, which she locates stored high on a warehouse shelf.
And Zorax isn't a nice person by any means.
No.
He helped supply humans and aliens for the game, for the hunt, so...
Yeah, I mean, Zorax is no hero. One thing I would say, I mean, having said what I said about there's a lot of the prejudice and everything that is not necessarily, like is being shown by characters, I would say I personally could have possibly not done with all of the villains being explicitly kind of Yakuza-like.
Mm. Yeah, lots of references to like samurai and wearing hair and top knots.
Yes.
Yeah,
which I do kind of think, maybe we could have not done with this. I don't know. But yeah.
So then the Doctor teams up with Krelbin, who is a grizzled former galactic marine, and teams up with him in the sense that the Doctor's pretending to be this wealthy person on the hunt.
Yeah.
Him and this Krelbin pair off to go hunting like 2 or 3 of the group that have broken off into a smaller pair. And I think the Doctor's hoping that this includes Amy and or Rory, because I don't think... has the Doctor seen Amy on the ship at this point?
He's seen Rory on footage because he recognises Agador.
I think he thinks Amy might be on the planet at this point, but...
Yeah.
He uses his sonic screwdriver to provoke a docile creature known as a Sholagi, which is like a giant... I was picturing the Mugatu from Star Trek, the original series, kind of. But insert your fluffy-looking creature of choice. And the Doctor then forces Krelbin to disarm and plays his hand that he's not really there to hunt humans.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Harry and Rory discover an abandoned prison armory, which is very fortunate,
yes.
stocking up with rudimentary weapons. And together with Andre and Dora, they launch a guerrilla campaign against the hunters. And that, I have to say, was a kind of a satisfying sequence where the hunters were getting their comeuppance from like primitive bows and arrows and stuff. And the Doctor and Dora narrowly escape an airwalker type monster using explosives to blast through a door just in time, aided by the timely intervention of Zebediah, who's another one of the hunters. But betrayal follows swiftly as Zebediah attempts to kill them, and forcing the Doctor to detonate some explosive canisters that are nearby, which then, I believe, kills Zebediah.
Yeah.
I don't think he gets teleported.
It's one of these things that just makes me... I don't think he is teleported. I think he's killed.
Yeah, because the Doctor, his second, because he only gets the 3 shots, and the second one is like a giant amoeba-like cube.
And we find out what happens to the third one fairly soon. But yeah. It's one of these things where like the Doctor is prepared to kill, but just not prepared to shoot. So back aboard the gangster ship, Amy is being pursued by Zarbatan. He's one of the hunters and kind of like gang leaders. I mean, I am losing track of all these names.
I think he's the one depicted on the cover, like the cybernetic.
Yeah. So Zarbatan, he's been kind of like caught up in like a fire, I think, and he's now kind of like a horrifying cybernetic husk. And Amy narrowly escapes thanks to Zorax, who jettisons Zarbatan into space via a garbage chute. And she now discovers the TARDIS as Amy, and she uses a Solon comlink to coordinate with the Doctor, who has a desperate plan.
Which involves teaching Amy how to fly the TARDIS.
Yes, it does. So, using a makeshift zip wire across the ruined facilities, the Doctor and co create a path to an abandoned communications centre. So Harry joins the Doctor on this, and he manages to restore power. But then Krelbin appears and shoots Harry, who disappears in a blaze of light. And everyone thinks that's Harry dead.
But fortunately, Zelbin was using the Doctor's gun.
Yes.
And he transmats and reappears on the LP9 station, and he's now in custody of the authorities. And at first, the police, who are led by the Doctor's cautious old friend Zelu, refuse to intervene due to the political complications of going after essentially like the mafia.
Yeah.
But with encouragement from Zelos and Harry, who has experience being an ex-police officer, Harry's very much, I feel like, a Mary Sue type character. I mean, I want to say, does Paul Finch have like a wife and a daughter?
Yes, he certainly has a wife.
Or has children, and some of the rants that Harry goes on about how his kids don't listen to him seemed a little close to the vest there.
In fact, Paul Finch has 2 children, Eleanor and Harry. Yeah. Anyway, back to the narrative.
With encouragement from all these folks, and as well as the Doctor, Zelu decides to do the right thing and orders an operational response, setting a trap for Krazen's, the mafia boss's, forces.
So on the moon Gorgoroth, Amy returns for the TARDIS, only for the fugitives to face another assault, because one of the hunters, Xyle, arrives in his Raptor Bird spaceship.
And he's the one who goaded Rory into losing the TARDIS in the first place.
Yes, yeah. And it's equipped with photon rifles and howitzers. Also, as well, Krazen's forces are regrouping. And then some of the hunters start turning against each other. So Kralbin turns against Krazen, but he's killed by the resurrected Zarbotan. And the Doctor, thinking quickly, challenges Krazen to a wager. If he can reach the observation booth with a 10-minute head start, the Doctor will keep the TARDIS. If not, then Krazen takes everything.
And so the Doctor flees across the wrecked moon base, pursued by Krazen and Zarbotan, who are following him on like hover discs. And he lures them to an old facility, which is dominated by a magnetic crater. And this is something that the Doctor had to pass through earlier, where he nearly lost his sonic screwdriver.
Yeah.
And after a chaotic chase involving hoverboard duels and near-death falls, the Doctor tricks Krazen into floating within the radius of the magnetron.
Yeah.
And then he basically comes apart where all of his cybernetic parts are ripped apart by the magnetic pull, which ends his reign of terror. But it's a very horrific and in detail described scene of his body being torn apart.
Yeah.
And then Zarbotan, also broken and malfunctioning, collapses after one last failed attack.
So on board the Raptor Bird, Xyle declares himself the new leader of the Syndicate, but is immediately arrested by the LP9 police, who board Krazen's ship disguised as technicians. And Zorax agrees to testify against the gangsters, thereby ensuring the end of this particular criminal empire.
And he goes into like witness protection to do that. And Sophie and Dora believe that Harry was killed, but he shows up wearing an LP9 police uniform, and there's a jubilant reunion with the family. And with the TARDIS crew also reunited and the prisoners freed, the Doctor and his friends leave the scarred moon of Gorgoroth and set a course to return the kidnapped survivors home to Earth.
Yeah, because as we've said, like there are people from so it's not just Harry and his family, but there are various refugees who had been smuggled into London, or who had gotten to London via various means, who had fallen foul of Zorax. So.
And thus ends the book.
Yeah.
So, what did you think about Hunter's Moon, Chris?
I enjoyed it. It was quite taut, I would say. I mean, it nipped along at a good old pace, but it was just, there was one section in particular that kind of like came to my mind where the Doctor, there's a section that we haven't really spoken about where the Doctor is spending some time with Sophie, Harry's wife, and like Sophie has to dress up in a cat suit for reasons, and she says, "Don't I look a bit silly? I feel like one of those TV action girls." And Matt Smith's doctor says, "A snivelling housewife is no good to me, but an action girl I can use." That feels slightly out of character.
Yeah.
But I think it felt broadly in character most of the time, I would say, for kind of particularly Rory. This is quite a strong Rory story, I would say. But yeah, I think I enjoyed it. Yeah, I enjoyed it. It's we've definitely read worse books, and it was good fun. And I did like the exploration of the underworld, and it felt more lived in, I would say, than say kind of like Terrance Dicks's explorations of this kind of setup. But yeah, how about you?
Yeah, I think he was definitely drawing on some of his experiences as a police officer in parts of this, and it very much felt more like Doctor Who visiting Star Wars to me than like Doctor Who proper.
Yes.
Some of the syndicates, reminded me of like the Han Solo movie or the Andor stuff.
Yeah.
They even mentioned like they're on the Outer Rim several times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did not enjoy this one, I think, as much as you did.
Yeah.
Where do I start? A lot of this book which is fine, but I mean, a lot of it does feel like this book is full of like the straight male gaze.
Yeah, that's true.
Where several times where women are just referred to as females, both in narrative and out of narrative.
Yeah.
And the author also finds it necessary to comment on the level of everyone's attractiveness when introducing a character. So he does equal opportunity here. I mean, he describes several men as very handsome, but goes into a lot of detail with the women as well in terms of describing their figure and all of that, which, I mean, this is 2011. So I think some of that may have been toned down or pulled back a little bit more, had this been published, say, in the last 5 or 10 years.
Yeah. It's not quite John Peel-esque, though.
No. I also didn't really like that the TARDIS team was split up for basically the entire book.
Yeah.
You get the scene of Rory and Amy in the casino at the beginning, but the Doctor's off doing his own thing the entire time, and they're split up a lot, and a lot of the narrative didn't feel very fun. It felt like not so much like going on an adventure, but hey, we need to survive this by the skin of our teeth.
Yeah.
Which some people gravitate more towards those type of gritty, realistic stories.
Yeah.
It just isn't kind of my cup of tea. I also thought it was a little incredulous that the Doctor's going to be carrying around a pulse rifle.
Yeah.
Even if he's going undercover as like a mafia agent. So I felt a little bit better when it was revealed to be a transmat gun.
Yeah. I mean, I was half expecting his police officer friend Zula to sacrifice himself or what have you. But yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, it is a bit of... I was thinking, it kind of feels... I mean, it doesn't feel like a new adventure. Maybe it feels a bit like a kind of like a past Doctor adventure as opposed to a Virgin Mystic Adventures.
Yeah, tonally it reminded me a lot of like the Final Sanction, in terms of how gritty and that one was.
Yeah.
But like, here's an example of, and a lot of this gets down to like the adjectives used to describe things and like the level of detail you go in to describe horrific stuff. So at one point I was reading so much of that, I was like, okay, just in this next chapter, I'm going to write down examples of this. Yes. And so I did. And these are all from the same chapter, but they can be found in quite a few of the chapters.
Yeah.
So words like grotesque, savage, bulbous, groping, chittering, spitting through gritted teeth, demonic, armored, corrupted, grimacing, sweaty, pounding, groping, masticating, sticky, bony, metallic taste of blood, smashing, burning, sneering, cutting, hideous, and squashing.
Yeah.
So reading that over and over again, it was like, and some people gravitate towards those types of stories and the more violent, horrific stuff. I do not. So that's just, my grade will probably reflect that.
Yeah, there's an exchange that doesn't go into kind of like all those adjectives, but an exchange that Harry has with a female police officer who is, I think, described as the tall female officer. And I can't remember her being given a name. Maybe she does eventually. But Harry says, you Torridon have got some pretty strange ideas. You're telling me that? She said. I'm a woman. I was like, what?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Maybe I take back my the comments about some of the prejudice not being in the narrative. Maybe.
I mean, for all the, it's a woman's place to serve that we get throughout, a lot of the different characters were spouting.
Yeah.
It needed to do a heck of a lot more heavy lifting.
Yes.
To counter the quantity of those statements. I feel like,
Yes.
Amy pushes back and gets upset a couple of times. Rory just kind of shrugs and gets on with it. But,
yeah,
there's no wonderful Matt Smith speech about,
no.
Now that you've taken care of your mafia problem, here's some other things you need to work on.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there isn't even kind of like a Sarah Jane Smith. There's no such thing as just a girl. Which is a line that people often kind of like say, criticising Doctor Who, sort of like say that it's really clunky, but like we don't really have that. But I must say, I enjoyed the drive of it. But I think, though, I'm the sort of person who would enjoy things like this. Like, I quite enjoy Ready or Not, and like there are various other slightly horror, slightly thrillery type things that I enjoy. But yeah, it is not without its faults.
There are parts that I did like. Like, I did like that when they're going through this wasteland and there's all these different traps and stuff. It is clever of the Doctor to then lead the villains back through it at the end and use all the different obstacles that he was able to overcome as a way to kind of have the villains get their comeuppance with like the magnet scenes and stuff, even though it was all like very gruesome. Like he had all those kind of what you might call like a Chekhov's gun.
Yeah.
But he did a good job of hiding them throughout so that when the Doctor kind of strung them all together at the end, it made sense and turned like an impossible situation around. Yeah. So I did appreciate that piece of it. And if I think, of like the average, and I don't know if this analogy is going to work or not, but if I think of like an average Doctor Who book as like a pop song, and like you have a Paul Cornell novel is like a punk song or a synth song, depending on the setting. And Kate Orman's books are like, Kate Bush or Tori Amos. This has a very like heavy metal feel to it.
Yeah.
Not quite as extreme as, say, like a Mick Lewis novel, which I've never read, but would imagine is more like death metal. But this is like gritty heavy metal, and so not my favorite genre, and that's going to impact my score.
Yeah, it might be kind of more like hair metal, but yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 10.
Okay. Yeah.
Kind of middle of the road. If you like the more gritty stuff, or if you like, the Doctor against nature or against all these different obstacles and a good strong Rory book, and you can set aside some of the misogyny, I think there's a lot you would get out of this one.
Yes. I think I'm going to go for a 6. I think probably going into this I might have given it a 7, but like the more I've thought about it, the more I've kind of gone, So
similarly, I was going to give it like a 4, but then by the time they got to the ending with some of the clever resolutions, I bumped it up to a 5.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of funny and a little sad that this book can largely be boiled down to convincing police to actually do their job and take on organized crime.
Yes.
Like when you strip everything else away, like that's the core of this is like convincing police to do some policing.
Yeah, which is at the heart of the Doctor's argument with his friend. Yeah, and like he at one point thinks that his friend might be corrupt, but has been not corrupted by individuals, but he has been made almost inept by the environment.
Yeah. And also just one other comment on the audiobook in particular. Yeah. And we didn't get a glimpse of this in the dramatic reading, but you can take my word for it. Anytime that Arthur Darvill was giving his Matt Smith 11th Doctor impersonation, all it sounded like was him doing a David Tennant impersonation when he's like really angry. So that was a bit jarring whilst listening because I had to keep reminding myself, no, this is an 11th Doctor story, because he sounds very much like David Tennant. All right. Well, that is Hunter's Moon.
Yeah. So I think this is where we hear feedback from the listeners.
Listen. And we have an email. This is from listener Amy. She doesn't say where she's from, but she spells realize and novelize with an S and not a Z, so I'm guessing she's not from the U.S.
Yeah.
She writes in with some comments about 2 Kate Orman novels that we've read previously. First, she thanks us for introducing her to Lady Gaga's song Babylon, which opened our Walking to Babylon podcast. And on Blue Box, she writes, she really loved that one. She mentioned that one of us thought the treatment of the main character situation was overly melodramatic, and I think that was me. But Amy says, as a trans person herself, she's deeply appreciative of the work Kate Orman has clearly put into researching this character instead of relying on stereotypes and the compassion shown in the novel for trans people in that character in particular, which totally understand and agree with. And I think I was making the comment that it felt more in line with like films at the time, like The Crying Game or Boys Don't Cry, that in terms of their treatment. And I don't think that the person's gender identity would have been weaponized in the same way as the villain did in that book. But she also mentions that, well, we don't review Target novelizations on the podcast. Amy wanted to highlight that she thought that the novelization of Remembrance of the Daleks was incredible, transcending its source material and patching a hole in the plot so well that she had never realized it had been there until watching the TV version. I think that was a Ben Aronovich one, tying back to your celebrity spotting earlier.
Yes, it was Ben Aronovich, yes.
How about on Facebook?
So, Facebook, we heard from Jeff Waddle about The Empire of Glass. I don't think we read this out last time. I don't think we did. Just checking my brain. I don't think we did.
No.
And Jeff said that he reread The Empire of Glass not long ago, and he reckons that Stephen was excellently written, and the Doctor is at its mischievous best, and the setting is well described and feels real, and that the ending feels large scale, though for Hartnell's era, but that's not the fault of the book, because the books at that time were meant to be larger than we got on TV. So he gives it a rating of 8 out of 10. We also as well heard from Luke Thomas, who said, "Greetings, chaps," which is a fantastic way to start a message. And he says that he loves the podcast and it's helping combat his depression due to world misery. And I just feel glad if we can do anything to help people at this time, because like it is grim out there. So yeah, that was just lovely for him to say that. Luke goes on to say that he's been binging the podcast this week and loving the picks and how our personalities complement each other. Luke says that he's been reading Who books for nearly 40 years and it's his favourite way of engaging with a good Doctor.
Mine as well, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, having the Doctor on TV is wonderful, but if not the TV show, books, it's nice that we have the plethora of options, but
yes,
yeah, books are up there for me.
And Luke asked us to consider reviewing The Year of Intelligent Tigers, as it's possibly Luke's favourite. And Luke says, keep it up, we appreciate it. So, which was, that was just lovely to hear.
Is that an Eighth Doctor?
Yes, it is an Eighth Doctor, yes. And I think it's a Kate Orman one.
Oh, yeah.
What about on Blue Sky and its other friend?
Well, on Blue Sky, we've heard from Lim King 13, who says of our Empire of Glass episode that it was another great episode, and we remain their absolute favorite regular Doctor Who podcast series.
Oh,
so thank you for the high praise.
Yeah, that is just lovely. Yeah, thank you.
And we've heard from Keith Say, who thanks us for the podcast. He says that Empire of Glass was not a book that he got at the time, but he regrets that now as it sounds rather fun. And this is one of those that was reissued as an ebook for free on the BBC cult website when Doctor Who had just cult status. So it may still be available via your internet archive of choice if you want to track down a copy. And then finally, we heard from Fantasy Bookworm on Blue Sky, who says that they don't know how it took me so long to find this podcast, but it's just what I've been looking for.
Oh.
So thank you, everyone, for the wonderful, kind words.
Yes.
And speaking of this podcast, and we're nearly at 100 episodes.
Yes.
And so for episode 100, even though it's not technically our 100th book, we've crossed that Rubicon a while back.
Yeah.
But Chris, let me read this little excerpt for you, and you let me know what you think.
Okay.
So after nearly 100 episodes of wandering through the hallowed, and sometimes dusty, corridors of the Doctor Who Book Club Library Clubhouse, you suddenly find yourself in a wing of the library you haven't explored before.
Ooh.
You see a crackling fireplace surrounded by comfy chairs and rows of books, their spines carefully arranged in chronological order, creating bands of colors across multiple shelves. Nearby, on an antique table, you notice piles of books, some stacked, some flung open, as if someone is in mid-research. You make your way further into the stacks, where you discover a collected anthology section that catches your eye, with 2 books in particular standing out. One is a well-worn blue paperback. Its cover shows a hat stand, holding both a long scarf and a cricket hat, which is stood in front of a door, complete with translucent glass, outlining a private detective agency, with the words, 10 stories, 7 doctors, and 1 enigma, underneath the title of Decalogue, which is emblazoned on the cover in silver lettering.
Yep.
Next to it sits a hardcover, wrapped in a dust jacket, depicting the faces of most of the doctors, along with Adric, realized in a familiar black dot pointillism style, with splashes of colorful accents. The title, in red and gold lettering, is The Target Storybook, and the volume promises 15 thrilling new adventures.
Mm-hmm.
You scan each book with your sonic screwdriver, which identifies the wooden pulp used to produce Decalogue's pages to some 31 years prior, originating in 1994. The same scan to the target storybook indicates more recent carbon levels in the wood, dating it some 6 years back to 2019. No matter which of these 2 books you choose, you find comfort that you'll likely get to the other title in due course. You pause to consider carefully. The Decalogue book was the first anthology of its kind, and includes contributions from Paul Cornell, Jim Mortimer, and Mark Platt. Decalogue implies groupings of 10, and you chuckle, noting how episode 100 Decalogue has a clever ring to it. On the other hand, the Target Storybook features the final ever contribution from Terrence Dicks to the world of Doctor Who, and also includes stories from both Colin Baker and Matthew Waterhouse. Which title do you pick? If you choose Decalogue, turn to page 10. If you select the Target Storybook, turn to page 15. So, Chris, what are we going to be reading for next month?
I think we're going to go to page 10, please.
Decalogue.
Decalogue.
Okay.
Yes.
So, our 100th podcast will be Decalogue.
Yes.
All right.
Fantastic. I thought that we were going to be doing one of the Find Your Fate type things.
I have yet to figure out how to do that in a podcast and do it
Yes.
in such a way to tell the plot of those without it being like a 3-hour episode. So
Yeah.
maybe I'll figure that out in time for our 150th.
Yes. Yes.
But yes,
Oh, brilliant. I'm really looking forward to Decalogue.
I was only able to narrow it down to those 2 and I couldn't decide. So
Yes.
cool. So yeah, episode 100, Decalogue. Has a nice ring-a-ding to it.
It does. It does have a nice ring-a-ding. Yes. Yeah. And next week I am on holiday in Italy, and I'm just saying that because when I was a teenager, I spent quite a bit of time reading decalogues whilst on holiday in various places.
So the tradition continues.
Yes, the tradition will continue. Yes.
And I think we've both have read Decalogue previously. It'll probably be a reread for both of us.
Yes.
But I couldn't tell you a single story in that collection.
Yeah.
Except I remember vaguely the second Doctor, maybe Zoe and Jamie getting chased around outside of an old house.
Yeah.
But that could have been from a different, 2 or 3 as well.
Yeah, I have some distinct memories, but I also remember where I was. Like, as in, I think I read it whilst I was attending a wedding that involved quite a bit of travel. So, anyway, a story I might kind of go into further next month.
For June,
Yeah.
we will be reading Decalogue. And until then, this has been Matt in Minnesota.
Chris in South London, happy reading and stay safe.
Thank you for listening to the all-new adventures of the Doctor Who Book Club podcast. Special thanks to George C. Music for use of their song Doctor Who Theme Swing Jazz Version. You can follow us on Twitter at ANDWBC Podcast and like us on Facebook. Help other listeners to find us by leaving a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or your podcatcher of choice. You can contact the show by emailing your thoughts to andwbcpodcast@gmail.com. And until next month, happy reading.
Cool. And thanks for shortening that summary down.
Yes.
So I opened that up and I was like, I don't know that we have time for a 3-hour podcast.
No.
I was thinking, I bet the synopsis will be shorter for this one too. Cause
No,
no, I guess not.
no. It's less of a synopsis, more of a slightly shorter retelling. Yes.
All right. Well, shall we jump in
Yeah, let's get started.
for our final recording on Skype?
I know, poor Sky.
Well, thanks for indulging me with that.
Yeah, that was great. Oh gosh, I really enjoyed that. It was good fun. Cool.
I tend to pick the even numbered ones,
Yes.
episodes, and so most of the anniversaries I get to pick, and I was like, at least narrow it down, and
Yes,
you can
yes,
pick.
Yeah, give me something to choose from. Yes.